What's up everybody, DRJ here, and today I want to talk to you guys about PvP and downtime in the land of DayZ. So the idea behind doing this talk is basically, came from a lot of the ideas that people have about PvP and killing people in DayZ. It seems there's a lot of focus on people thinking that there's either certain areas you can't kill people at, or certain ways that you can't kill people. Certain ways are good, other ways are bad, some ways are honorable, other ways are less honorable. And a lot of this, in my opinion, stems from the frustration of being killed because it is such a monstrous setback. And in my eyes, well, PvP gets sort of the, that spotlight as to why people are frustrated. I think the real frustration lies in the logistics and working its way actually up to the PvP. And if these kinds of issues were solved, which essentially relate to downtime, the PvP wouldn't get such a bad rap. We wouldn't all be arguing with each other over, what the best way is to kill somebody, or what way is honorable, or should be people killing people at all, etc., etc. Before we even go into that, just want to lay out a few baselines here. So the reason why we have PvP in general, right, is because in this game, getting more powerful is all about getting gear, and there's two ways of becoming powerful. One, getting that gear would involve going out to some place like Northwest Airfield, Cherno Electro. Walking around to static loot spawns being, places where gear spawn, the same place every time, regardless of server, time of day, etc. Obviously this creates a dangerous scenario because everybody knows where that gear is going to be, and everybody knows where the highest tier gear is, so those places are camped out. It's really weighs against the whole idea of tactics and smart gameplay when everybody knows where everybody else is going to be at any given time if they want such and such loot. So one of the best ways to get that loot, ironically, ends up being people that are camping other loot spawns, and that is killing people for it. It's the fastest way to get gear. I think the only thing you can't grab from someone's body is their camo, and there is a obviously extremely high incentive to encourage people to want to kill other players. For that reason alone, it's arguing against the whole idea of PvP in general is, in my eyes, similar to being frustrated with water for being wet. Like I said, so those would be the reasons why you have two ways to get loot. So you've got static loot spawns, killing people, high incentive to kill people, high incentive to get gear. And so what we're starting to see in the game is, as a result of this map being so big and people loving the player interactions that they're getting, the most popular videos and the most enjoyable experiences people are getting, come from those player interactions. Because the map is so big and those player interactions are so hard to come by, and that gear is so easily obtainable by killing somebody else, we're ending up with a lot of issues revolving around PvP and basically highly very, very specific areas. These areas tend to be things like Northwest Airfield, Cherno, and Electro. The game is, I don't want to say devolving necessarily, but these locations are becoming more and more popular as time goes on, because if you were to look at a topographical map of where everybody spends the most time in the DayZ, you'd see bright red areas over, well, probably Electro more so than any other place, and then to a lesser extent Cherno, and actually even Northwest Airfield, I think. Also, with the amount of posts that you see on the forums on both Reddit and the official DayZ forums about new players going out to Northwest Airfield, that combined with the knowledge that this game blew up from 0 to 1 million players, over the course of basically several months, most players playing this game at any given time are going to be new, and so the idea of that you can't kill players in any given zone because they're new, I think, is a bit of a misnomer, because most players in the game, regardless of where they're at, are going to be new. It's quite frequently you read all sorts of posts, about people running out to the Northwest Airfield because they know that's the best place to get gear when they start out, and a lot of the, ironically, I think many of the geared encounters are happening in places like Electro, where you're finding other players that have gear and battling it out. Because the type of combat or the scenarios that are taking place at Northwest Airfield tend to be these long-range sniper encounters because there's so much wide open area, and in my opinion, I enjoy those. Like I said, encounters against people that actually have gear much better. But like I said, new players are all over the place. One of the other issues with PvP is the close quarter combat. The game, obviously, like I said, highly encourages this sniper style long range combat for a lot of reasons. You have poor hit detection in the game for all sorts of different reasons. So it can be really difficult to shoot and kill anything reliably that's especially on the move. Even when you're shooting something that's sitting still, it's not uncommon to shoot something, open up and shoot them, whether it's, zombies or another player first, and have them pivot around and like actually shoot and even kill you in the midst of you shooting them and you started first. I don't really know why it works. Obviously the engine has a lot of issues. But the way that close quarter combat works, you need to have movement speed needs to be faster than it currently is. Otherwise what ends up happening is it's like this Mexican standoff scenario essentially, where you get two people that spot each other, and because there's so little movement speed available to your characters, they both just plant themselves, start firing at each other, and then typically what happens is both players end up dead, and if they don't both end up dead, then they end up with broken legs and bleeding and all sorts of stuff. So the only way that you end up killing somebody is essentially by shooting them in the back, which is a valid strategy, and I think it's great. But it would be great if you could move a little bit faster, and obviously my goal is not to turn this into a COD or anything like that. I'm not asking for kill perks or stuff like that. But when you can't fire and move at the same time, what ends up happening, like I said, is most close quarter PvP encounters where players are aware of each other turn into these encounters where both players either end up dying or both are seriously wounded. Downtime in DayZ, what has a lot of different issues. The big areas of downtime are going to be traveling from just about anywhere, right? Even traveling in a city can take a long time to go around there. You've got all sorts of issues standing in your way, right? Whether it's artifacting, whether it's zombies, doing their glitches. Even if we assume, though, for argument's sake, that none of these so-called glitchy factors are an issue, let's just wipe those out. You've still got a huge map that in general supports somewhere around 30 to 40 players at any given time. And the travel time associated both with traveling not just from city to city, but God forbid, from one area of map to the other, basically one corner of the map to another, is huge. It's why people have obviously commonly joked that DayZ is a marathon simulator versus anything else. I'm playing one of those action survival games, I Am Alive. It comes across as like this survival game. What ends up happening is it turns into like this climbing simulator. It's an idea that basically ended up taking up the core focus of the game, and it turned off a lot of people. And what's happening in DayZ is, with the discontinuation of the respawn button and the long travel times in between location to location, it's turning. I feel like what's going to happen is DayZ's popularity may ultimately end up being its undoing, because it's that much faster. The game will be broken down to a science with that many players playing the same map again and again and again. And what ends up happening is the issues in the game pop up that much faster. So being frustrated, you're trying to meet up with friends to do anything, and somebody's spawning in Kamenka, someone else is spawning in Solnichny, and you're like, well, how do we meet up? Well, we don't have any way to actually find each other in game. Like, there's no map, we don't stall with anything. People, when they load up the game, it's not like you're a new survivor out in the zombie apocalypse. It's like you're a fresh spawn off a newly shipwrecked island or something like that. You literally turn up like you were washed ashore with nothing, and you have very few tools to find each other. And even if you do use external maps like DayZDB.com or something along those lines, you could easily be running for the better part of 25-30 minutes easily to meet up each other. And then when you end up being killed via what we're talking about in this video, via PvP, it's very frustrating and easy to be like, oh, well, those MF and PvPers, killing these new players along the coast. But like I said, there's all this great incentive via player interactions and getting that gear for people who want to do something like that. Even if there weren't those incentives to want to kill their players, it's almost like a moot point to argue against that. It's not going to solve anything by saying people shouldn't be doing that. Like, that's just not going to solve anything. So whether you're for it or whether you're against it, if you want to fix the issue, the issue in my eyes is not fixing the ability to kill somebody in certain locations or what guns they should be or shouldn't be using. The issue would be decreasing the logistics towards getting from point A to point B. Rocket has talked about adding in extra vehicles, but he's also talked about making the maps bigger, and he has talked about increasing player size for standalone game. But when you talk about simultaneously increasing map size and increasing player size, what I'm worried about is obviously, the whole idea of this relative feeling of the game. You increase map size, you increase player size, and you get a similar feeling. In my eyes, vehicles should be something that would be used most likely to, travel materials from one part of the map to the other. Say you're down at the coast and you want to go visit the airfield, that would be a better way to get a vehicle to go over there. I don't think that you should necessarily need vehicles to go from town to town. It shouldn't be a 15-minute run to go from Cherno to Electro. And so long as things like that are in-game, and I know that, like I said, there's this fear that this game's going to turn into like a COD-style combat or things like that. But as it is right now, the game is turning into, as a result of not having easier access from town to town and having so few areas that have legitimate or, I guess that'd be a better way to put it, would be like equal opportunity loot spawns. What's happening is the game is turning into something more like a COD style frag fest, because players desperately crave that interaction that they're getting with other players, and because the map is so big and there tend to be so few people on any given map, any given server rather, what's happening is they're congregating basically when it's around Electro to talk to each other, to play with each other, and it's so much fun. And in my eyes, one of the only ways to get around that, like I said, is to create more areas that are closer together. Obviously, some of these things will be resolved in the standalone game, more buildings that are enterable, things like that. But as it stands now, spawning in areas like Kamenka and things like that, or Komarovo, are in no way, shape, or form even remotely close to being able to spawn in Electro and go on a 1-minute loot run. So at the end of the day, like I said, the crux of my argument is that the real issue is not with PvP, it's with downtime. Like I said, the removal of the respawn button, people are now using zombies, to basically kill themselves to respawn. There's no way to spawn in and meet up with friends. There's no way to choose your spawns in general. It would be great if you could either choose your spawns, possibly choose a gear loadout as well to make it easier to meet up in game. Whether like you want to choose like maps or weapons, sometimes some sort of starting equipment, something like that. And if it is so long, like I said, from town to town, and even when you finally get there, the possibility of being killed by any number of different ways. But like I said in this video, we're talking about PvP. Really discourages a lot of players that are both new and veteran alike, because it's such a massive setback. And the more variables you bring in that equation, basically the more friends you bring to the table that you're trying to meet up with, the harder it is. And it encourages you to either try to play by yourself, try to play with as few friends as possible, or ultimately what I'd imagine will end up happening is players stop playing at all because of the frustration involved in just getting to do basic things like meeting up with each other or getting to a certain town to try to learn that town. It's very, very, very difficult to even get there at all, and like I said, that addition of having PvP is obviously frustrating for a lot of people. So those are the thoughts on my game, on the game, and let me know what you guys think. As always, comments, criticism, critiques.